ਵਿਕਟੋਰੀਆ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਕਾਨਫਰੰਸ 'ਚ BC ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਜੌਨ ਹੌਰਗਰ ਨੇ ਨਸਲਵਾਦ ਵਿਰੋਧੀ ਡਾਟਾ ਐਕਟ ਦੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂਆਤ ਦੀ ਘੋਸ਼ਣਾ ਕੀਤੀ, ਜਿਸ ਦਾ ਉਦੇਸ਼ ਸੂਬੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਸਲੀ ਭਾਈਚਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੁਆਰਾ ਦਰਪੇਸ਼ ਪ੍ਰਣਾਲੀਗਤ ਵਿਤਕਰੇ ਨੂੰ ਖਤਮ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ। ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ BC ਨਸਲਵਾਦ ਵਿਰੋਧੀ ਪਹਿਲ ਕਦਮੀਆਂ ਲਈ ਸੰਸਦੀ ਸਕੱਤਰ ਰਚਨਾ ਸਿੰਘ ਵੀ ਸ਼ਾਮਿਲ ਹੋਏ।
Invited guests, it is just truly an honor to be here today to participate in the introduction of a first ever race-based data legislation in the country. I want to thank all of you, particularly Parliamentary Secretary Singh, for all of the work that went into preparing to bring forward this legislation. And it is with a significant amount of pride that I know Minister Eby will stand in a few short minutes and be recognized by the first ever South Asian speaker in the legislature of British Columbia. He will be surrounded by the largest collection of non-Caucasian members that have ever sat in the BC legislature. Chinese descent, members of South Asian descent, Filipino descent, LGBTQ, Indigenous descent, all of that, the first time ever, the largest group ever to be collected in a legislature, bringing forward legislation that is indeed long overdue. But process matters. And Dr. Francis, your remarks were inspiring, as they always are. But, and I know that there will be questions later on, and process will be indeed part of that. But it is important. It's the creation of the legislation that I'm most proud of. Parliamentary Secretary Singh went out into the community and said, how do we create legislation that will work for you? As Dr. Francis said, for too long, racialized communities have been said, prove that. How do you know that? And the answer was, you have the information, why don't you look at it? Better yet, why don't you share that information with all British Columbians so that we can build the inclusive, diverse society that all of us talk about when we celebrate our multicultural heritage. I always say that I'm the son of an Irish immigrant, but it's got to be more than where you came from. It's what can we do tomorrow to make this dynamic, diverse, multicultural community also an anti-racist. Working with Regional Chief TG and Robert Phillip from the First Nations Summit, and indeed all of the Leadership Council, as bringing forward the Declaration Act, again, a first in North America. Now that we're a couple of years into it, of course, through a global pandemic, we're working on the action plan to deliver on the promise of the legislation. But again, as I look at this first steps when it comes to race-based data, I can look with some pride to the work that we have done with Indigenous communities, with government officials across the board to build a work plan so that the Declaration does have more than just the promise of introduction, but the reality of an equitable society with First Peoples at the... I always tell Ellie that when I'm going to work, I'm going into a room full of women who are from different backgrounds, different experiences, that help shape the government policies that all of us want to see today. And this legislation was put together predominantly by women, Rashna and Dr. Francis among them, but many of the women that are sitting and I'm looking at today were key participants in the creation of this legislation.